My name is Noel, and first of all, I'm a member of WEAC, and at the same time, I'm a member of planning community. So today, the question is, what is the mission for WEAC Environmental for Justice? WEAC exists since 1988. WEAC Environmental for Justice build healthy communities by ensuring that low income and people of color participate meaningfully in the creation of sound and fair environmental health and protection policies and practices. Thank you.
So that's the mission. So the next thing is membership. So what is membership? Well, membership is a very vital vital part of what we do here at WEAC. We ask everyone to become a member of WEAC because it's so important that we have members that carry out our mission. So if you're not a member yet, you should be. It's only $25 a year. Look forward to becoming a member and participating in all the things that we do, from Albany trips to lobbying in City Hall to the federal policy group. So make sure you become a member and be a member of WEAC. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Ooh, I like the energy. Don't get me started. I'm like loving being in this studio. It's kind of fun. Don't get us started. We might start a talk show and we might take over this whole entire thing. But I just want to remind everyone that WEAC has a podcast called Uptown Chats. We're on all the platforms where you can get podcasts. We talk about environmental justice within our community in Northern Manhattan, and we talk to people in the neighborhood and the communities that are doing this work as well. So that way everyone kind of stay up on all the different topics and things that we talk about at WEAC. Our current episode is actually honoring Cecil Corbin Marks and talking a little bit about the history and the starting of WEAC with Peggy Shepard, our executive director, is on the podcast, talking a little about the early years as starting out as an organization, and Cecil being kind of one of the first people to be hired. And we talk a little bit about the EJ NYC report as well. So it's a really great episode. Anytime we have Peggy on, it's a good episode. So definitely take a second to listen, especially if you want to know more about Cecil, as we kind of come up on an honoring of the street as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joyce Bialik, and I'm going to talk about our agreement about how we function as a community. So we say be present and participate. We want to speak from the I perspective. We want to land our plane. We need to respect other points of view. And we want to maintain a judgment-free zone. Thanks. Bye.
It's really great to be here. My name's Annie. I'm the Climate Justice Campaign Manager here at WEAC. Excuse my voice, I'm a little hoarse. But I lead the Climate Justice Working Group. If you've been to a WEAC meeting before, you might have heard me blabbering about the land in our communities and how important it is about control, right? Who controls that land? When we have developers building in our neighborhoods, we get polluting facilities, bus depots, luxury buildings, things that we don't need or things that don't help our communities thrive. But when our communities control the land and we're making democratic decisions about what's built on that, we can get permanently affordable housing, green space, health centers, all of the things that we need to succeed. And there's a big movement in New York called community land trusts that are nonprofits that take land out of the speculative market, out of the money-making market, and hold it for community needs, and is run by a board of community members that democratically decide what we want to build on that land. East Harlem actually has a CLT, the East Harlem El Barrio CLT. It was the second CLT in the city that actually was able to acquire buildings. They now have 4 buildings under their control that are going to be permanently affordable housing for East Harlem residents forever. There's no opt-out period. So East Harlem El Barrio CLT is doing really exciting work, but WEAC wants to see what other opportunities are uptown that we can identify, different lots, vacant lots, boarded up buildings, for sale buildings that instead of being turned into luxury housing that is not affordable, are taken and put into these CLTs that then we democratically as a community can decide what to do with. So that leads to our project that I'm going to turn it over to Shael to talk a little bit about.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Shel Pandya. I'm a WEAC member and part of the membership planning committee. And I like the energy, and that is the energy we need. So there's been a lot of data compiled through maps and everything of where the empty lots are, where the vacant lots are, where foreclosed buildings are, right? But nothing's been on the ground where we've gone and noted that this is exactly what it is. So now we have an opportunity to go out and actually look at each and every neighborhood and note which ones there are. So we're asking for volunteers to come and help. It's a paid volunteership, so there's $25 an hour. It's gonna be in shifts of 2 hours each. And we've taken a cluster of blocks together and made them into like one big cluster of blocks. And we are asking people to go with, there'll be a buddy assigned to them, or bring your friend and go along. There'll be a thing on your on your phone that will be provided to you, and you just go and make some notes on it that this building is empty, there is a guard, and what that will help us is go make all these notations of where we can potentially have CLTs, and talk to elected officials who are going to come here today, whom one of them might be, and then push them to help us out, right? We love the energy, we just want it to be converted into coming out, be on the ground, and help us note all this stuff. So, anything I miss?
That is perfect. We are starting, so we are looking for people to sign up who want to help us survey. You got to be able to walk for about 2 hours, so that's the caveat, but we'll train you on how to use the tool. We're doing this surveying in May and June, so the sign up is here, but you can also, it was in the newsletter, so feel free to head over there and sign up. And I'm really excited to kick this off, and we'll be talking about this more, but come and chat with me if you have any questions.
Okay, so just want to let everyone know these are announcements that are happening, so they're going to be like kind of quick. And if you want more detail about what's being presented at this point, our staff members will be also on the 3rd floor, and they'll be able to talk to you and take your information there, and also in the sign up section up front. Thank you. So, Healthy Homes is our working group. And it meets monthly on the 3rd Thursday of every month. So on the 3rd Thursday of every month, Healthy Homes meets. For more information about that, please use the QR code that's right on your screen. The NYCHA Working Group, which is with LJ, and he can be contacted at lonnie@weact.org. And they also meet monthly. They meet the 4th Tuesday of every month. So they meet the 4th Tuesday of every month. So at 6:30. So please join LJ. And Marilady has a group called We Act in Espanol. And she will be coming to the front shortly to talk about We Act in Espanol.
Thank you, Pamela. Yes, our working group in Spanish, we have every second Thursday of the month at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. You can scan the code. Next month, going to be May 9. We're going to speak about civic engagement, our local candidates, what they do, and how you can reach out to them. And 2 days ago, we have a great one that we have dealing for poison prevention, and she was speaking about a lot of things that we use daily in our home that we don't know that is poisonous. So please join us if you want to continue to improve your English, your Spanish, and the one that uses Spanish, and share with them. Thank you.
So we have the transportation working group that is currently on hiatus, but will be resuming within the next 2 months. When it does resume, it'll be every 3rd Monday at 6 o'clock. And you can contact me at pamela@weact.org. Except MLK Day, yes. Thank you.
Hello again. I'm here to talk about the Beauty Inside Out Working Group. We meet every 3rd Wednesday of the month. And we talk about toxics in our cosmetics and everything beauty justice. So I know some of you are like, you've seen like these pretty postcards on your chairs, and so I'm here to talk about them. Okay, so current federal regulation for like our cosmetics in the United States are really terrible at protecting our health, which means that a lot of companies are able to put a lot of really bad ingredients in all of our products, ingredients that are really harmful to our health. They cause things like asthma, cancer, reproductive harm. Sorry, excuse me. And over in like the EU, they banned over like 2,500 of the worst toxic chemicals. Here in the US, we only ban 11 of those. And in New York State, unfortunately, we don't have disclosure laws where companies are required to say what's in their ingredients. And so a lot of the, so racialized beauty standards here in the US, standards that like prefer things like that are Eurocentric beauty standards, like straight hair and lighter skin, really affect the products that people use in the US. Here at we did a study, the Beauty Inside Out working group did a study called the Beauty Inside Out campaign, where we surveyed people up in northern Manhattan, and we found that Black and Latina women actually use a lot more beauty products and hair products. And I'm so sorry, I'm like super nervous. But and a lot of these products have a lot of these toxic ingredients like formaldehyde, talc, lead, mercury. And so something that we're advocating for is the Beauty Justice Bill, which will ban about 20 of the worst toxic chemicals. And so we're asking for you all to sign these postcards, and we'll be sending them to Governor Hochul, urging her to pass this legislation. So yeah. And if you want to be like involved in a lot of the work that we do, you can sign up for our working group. So yeah.
Yes, that's good.
So this is the workforce development working group that happens every first Tuesday of the month, where we help people get employment and understand the challenges and understanding that the green economy should be ours and we should be conquering it, and making sure that we adjust our playing field to ensure that people of color and Black and brown communities get a part of this economy. So every Tuesday we meet, and hopefully you can show up and we'll help you.
My moment to shine. Again, I realized I did not introduce myself. I'm Lonnie Portis. I also go by LJ. I'm the New York City policy manager here at WeAct. And one of the things that has been causing me gray hair is one of my friends who I haven't seen in a while noticed that I actually have a few going on, is this budget, is the budget fight that we have going on right now. Has anyone heard anything about the budget so far in New York City? Read anything, heard anything? I'm hearing some nods, some yeses. Not a lot of positive things, right? Coming from particularly our mayor, Eric Adams. Basically, a lot of cuts have been made to a lot of critical services that impact our communities, whether it be libraries, schools, community composting, parks. A lot of these things have been cut, and so we've been fighting back against those cuts through like the preliminary budget process that just happened last month. So giving testimony and making sure that City Council is on our side. To make sure when they go into the negotiations for fighting for the budget that they can make sure that they're fighting for the things that we find very important. What's particularly important here at WeAct is that there is such a lack of investment in climate and environmental justice, and we need more of that investment in order to deal with the climate crisis that we have and to remediate and make changes to our environments, correct? So we need money to do all of those things, and also for mandates that we have for different laws. And so what we're doing is we know that there are very specific things we have to be very strategic this time around, because we're not necessarily asking for a lot of new programs or additional money. We are fighting to put money back into the budget for certain things and to reinstate some of the things that have been cut as well. So that's why we kind of have some very targeted things that we want to go over that are very much high priority for us when it comes to the budget this cycle, this time around, and what we're fighting for. So these are kind of the high-level things that we are going to be fighting for in the budget, and I'll be able to tell you guys in a second how you guys can help with that. But I want to kind of go over very quickly what those things are. $1 million. I think you have it in front of me because I'm going to try to memorize it and impress everybody, but that's not going to happen. So $1 million for the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, which is important. We just heard. Andy talked about that we're going to hear from that office for the NYC report, which is very important, but they have to be able to do the outreach for this work that they're doing. We have to be able to fund this initiative that we have for environmental justice, and so they need that base funding for outreach, for staff to do this work that we have. The next big one is $7 million per year for funding for community composting operations. So this is a small but very efficient program for community composting. So I don't know if some of you've seen like the farmers markets or the Grow NYC, where you can drop off your food scraps and it turns into compost for our parks and soils and things like that. Well, that program was completely cut. Mayor Adams decided that out of our $108 or $9 billion budget, that this $7 million program that is very effective should just be completely eliminated. Some people lost their jobs, and you know, it's a very devastating thing. But there's some hope. Some good news here is that the city council is really backing to put this money back, and they included it in their response to the mayor's budget, saying that they are going to be fighting for, as a city council, to get this $7 million back. So that's really assuring, and it can make me breathe a little easier, but the fight doesn't mean that the fight is not over, and that we want to make sure we want to continue pushing this as well. The next one a lot of people may have ever heard of is the 1% for parks. I don't know, anyone, show of hands or nodding if anyone's heard of 1% for parks. Okay, I see some people understanding that. So basically that's saying that we need to be taking 1% of our entire operating budget as a city and putting it towards our parks. This is simple, basic maintenance, the health, the safety, climate resiliency, all of that goes into something that we enjoy universally. And we do have a podcast episode that will be coming out about parks as well, so you can listen to that. So there has been consistent cuts, again, through Mayor Adams' administration so far, through the parks program. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that there is guaranteed 1% for parks funding in the budget going forward. We're very behind as a city. Other cities spend way more for fewer park space than we do. And New Yorkers don't like to not be number one in these kind of things. So we need to start pushing ourselves to spend more and more on our parks and these green spaces. The last two things, next is $600 million to deep retrofit and electrify 500 school buildings with the focus on school buildings and environmental justice communities. We know that school buildings is a huge polluter when it comes to our buildings stock, and the city needs to put the money and investment into making sure that these buildings are healthier and not polluting, but also safer for the indoor air quality for the students, because deep retrofits also include HVAC. We know what happened last summer with the fires. No one knew what to do, right? No one knew where to get clean air, how to get access to it. We were all kind of in danger in that way, especially those who have kids. And kids who have respiratory issues suffered a lot, but schools should be safe places. It should be a place where people can go and feel like the air is being clean and they can be in that space. So that's kind of one thing that we're fighting for. And also to electrify schools and get them off of the fossil fuel that they're using right now to fuel their buildings. And the last one is a $7 million investment and basically increased enforcement and transitioning our buildings in our homes. So Department of Buildings has Local Law 97, which is a mandate to decarbonize or decrease the pollution in some of our larger buildings, but they need the money and staffing to do that properly. And so we want to make sure that that mandate and that law goes well. So we really want to make sure these are kind of like our high priorities right now. When you see me again next year, it might be a different budget fight where we can be really pushing for new programs and additional things. But right now, we're really trying to save some of these core pieces and making sure that there is investment in climate and environmental justice. So how you can help, that's the next slide, is there's some flyers that are going around that I have here that I'll make sure everyone gets before they leave. They're upstairs on the third floor. But if you're already up there, you can grab one. Basically, this is a way for you to kind of take action. So if you want to support this campaign where we have these different outlines of what we want to do, you can easily scan this QR code or go to this website. It's going to take you to Action Network, which is going to have a letter that you can sign. It's going to be very simple: name, email, zip code. I think that's all you have to do. You can add things to the letter if you want to add some context of why you think these things are important, but you can send these letters to our city council member who's going to be working with our budget negotiation team, and also the mayor directly and some of the mayor's teams who are responsible for the budget. So if you really want to get involved, really easy level of activism to just show that you support investing in climate and environmental justice, definitely send that letter out there. And if you have any questions about that, always feel free to reach out to me. I have business cards somewhere floating around, or you can find me, and I have the QR code with me right here if you wanted to scan it before you go. I think that's it.
So, on to the main event. So now begins our candidate forum. So let's start with a quick review of some of the candidates who are running. Next slide. So Eddie Gibbs is the incumbent here in the 87th Assembly District. And so we did invite him to attend. And after about a month or so of trying to work that out, it was discovered that his calendar was too full to attend. He hopes to address our membership at a later time, and we look forward to engaging with him after the primary election. Xavier Santiago is the chair of the Community Board 11, and he is also a candidate running in the 68th Assembly District, and he will be attending today's candidates forum. So we look forward to having him. William Smith is also a candidate who is running here in the 68th Assembly District. He is a community member. He is part of the Metropolitan Cab, and he too will be attending today. And the first candidate that you will meet today is Tamika Mapp. She is already in the room. She is the reigning district leader for the 68th Assembly District, and she is also a candidate as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a professor at Rutgers University. It's okay, somebody cut it, it's fine. It's one of the things that I direct. I'm also a resident of East Harlem, so I'm a constituent of whoever's gonna be sitting in the seat, and have lived in East Harlem since 2007. I have 2 children in our public schools, attend public schools here in East Harlem. I'm also the Manhattan Borough President appointee to the New York City School Board. So we're here with one of our candidates for Assembly District 68 here in East Harlem, excited to engage in this conversation in collaboration with We Act. So, Honorable Tamika Mapp, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you to run to represent the Assembly District 68?
Sure. So my name is Tamika Mapp. I am a veteran. I'm a mother. I am an environmental advocate. I'm a Girl Scout leader, so everybody knows Girl Scouts is my life. And what makes me keep on getting up every day is the community, pretty much. Our children keeps me up and have me solving unimaginable questions that only they can solve. So I talk to a lot about our youth and what they like for environmental studies. I talk to our seniors who are desperate in need of housing to stay in our communities. And I talk to our small business owners that want to do environmental things, but they can't afford to do it because there's no funding for them. Right. So that's who I am. I'm just a community member. I'm also your state committee member. I'm also your district leader. I never really lead with those particular things because a title is just a title. I hope that my work actually speaks for itself regardless of where it goes. And I'm here for the long haul. I've been doing this for 10 years and I am not going anywhere.
Thank you, Tamika.
No problem, thank you.
So I'm gonna start with the yes or no question. Our membership wants to know, just yes or no, do you support ending the use of fossil fuels in New York?
Yes.
Excellent. So we do have some environmental issues here in East Harlem. Given the average surface temperature in East Harlem, particularly around our summer months, they're roughly about 2 degrees higher than any other place in the city. And then we also have air quality issues here in East Harlem. So what sort of resilience programs or policies do you want to support when you get to Albany to help ameliorate some of those environmental issues that we have here in East Harlem?
Well, the first one is community gardens. Community gardens actually is the well-being of our community. It not provide healthy food access, but it also boosts self-esteem. It boosts a sense of calmness. When people go to a community garden, they actually find their best friend. I'm a part of a community garden. And it's a shame that we can't really get access to the community garden because they kind of locked off and it's far and few between. So I want to make sure that we have community gardens. I want to create a greener and cooler roof program because as we're going to really combat climate justice, we need to make sure that our roof would be able to do that. So the greener roof program will actually provide vegetation and making sure that everything stays cool. Our cooler roof will actually redact the heat from the building, from the roof, from the sun, and actually make it a little bit cooler. That's the only way that we can be able to be carbon free by 2040. As the state committee member, we always press our elected officials on greener climate, and we actually got a resolution passed. It was called a New Green Deal to make sure that New York State is on track. Right now, we're behind when it comes to environmental issues, so we are forcing them to make sure we're on track by 2040.
Thank you. Yeah, the New Green Deal is a common conversation that we have when it comes to school buildings, when it comes to housing, when it comes to all the things. So we're great to have you championing that work. How will you increase community voices and decision-making power in land use? It's a critical issue in East Harlem. Manhattan is really overburdened with polluting facilities and land grant opportunists. How are we going to hold those back?
By evolving the community, making sure that when a developer goes to the community board, that holds weight instead of just doing it like the lip service dance that they went to the community board, and by the time they get to the land use program, they just don't care what the community board says. We need to be a little bit more steadfast in making sure that our community board, if they say no to a land use project, they need to have the same weight as an elected official that says no with it, because the community knows exactly what we need, right? We always have to center everything around community. This whole thing is not about we, it's about how we are going to do it together. So it's never I, right? I'm a member of WEAC and I've been a member for years, and when I'm not too busy, which I am, I go to their lobby days, I go to their working groups, just so I can be my hands and my ears on the ground to actually know what's going on. Because part of the elected official's job is being hands on the ground, knowing what's for the community, because my job is to lift your voices up. It's not about what I want. I just want community gardens, but you know, the whole community wants something different. They want more green spaces. They want community gardens. They want flowers. My children wants to be able to walk down the street without stepping on numerous things. They want to be able to plant an apple tree and be able to get apples from the community. So these are the things that I kind of like center everything around. Every policy that I have is from the community. It's not something that I made up and I dreamed up. That's 10 years of listening, 10 years of talking, and 10 years actually researching to make sure that I'm in line with whatever the community wants.
Excellent, thank you. So speaking of community voices, this week, the New York State Education Department released a report on mayoral control. We learned that parents, teachers, and students do not feel included in the decision-making process in our schools. Yes or no question, do you believe in mayoral control?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So to add on to that a little bit, what legislation would you support to bring more resources to young people in our community, especially at a time where we're seeing cuts to early childhood programs, school funding, and libraries across the city?
Ooh, after school. Right, so you know, our children go to school as young as pre-K3, but there is no after-school program for these kids. Mm-hmm. And right now, our attendance is like crazy because we have pre-K3 students in our schools, and they ain't going to school because there's no after-school program like it is for their peers, right? So when we think about bringing other programs into the fold, we need to make sure that we have everything covered. So I would like to have a pre-K3 after-school program that will do pre-K3 all the way through high school, making sure that our children can enhance their literacy goals. I'm also pretty much fighting to make sure that each community has its own CEC So the community can really dictate in how our community is going to be educated, because parents know exactly how we're going to be educating our children. I would like to be able to have homeschool resources, because for a while I got so fed up with the school system, I actually took my kid completely out of the school system and did homeschooling. And to find out that New York State does not even provide the basic resources like Philadelphia, New Jersey, Ohio. When you want to homeschool your kids, they give you a laptop, they give you curriculum. New York is like, well, just send out your little IEP thing and then come and give you your report. Thank you very much, right? Home education should be supported no matter which way you go for your child. So that's the policies I would be championing.
Thank you. As an assembly member, how do you achieve equity in healthcare? And would you support the New York Health Act to have a single payer system?
Yes. Oh my God, that's been a fight forever. And and I'm hoping that it get passed this session, but it probably won't. I find when it comes to laws that's pertaining to people and want to help people, we don't have enough political courage, elected officials in Albany that has the courage to say, you know what, I want to do this, let's do this, no matter what the governor says. So yes, I'm going to be pushing for it until it passes, like anything that's common sense and helping my people. But also we'll be fighting for making sure that mental health is accessible inside of that program, right? And making sure that just like we go and get our eyeglasses checked and get our hearing checked, we need to be the same way when it comes to our mental health. There should be no cap on mental health services. If I feel like I need to talk to somebody, I should be able to talk to somebody regardless if I have health insurance or not. So that's the only caveat I would add up into the single payer system, to make sure it's grounded and rooted in the mental health.
Yeah, we're seeing rises in the need for mental health services,
Yes.
particularly after the pandemic. Last question from me. We've seen an alarming uptick in surveillance in predominantly Black and Latino communities, and we've even had the National Guard in our subway system. How would you use your platform to protect Northern Manhattan residents from excessive policing?
Well, first of all, I have a great friend of mine. Her name is Nadine. She is from Howard. She's a law professor. And she got this initiative called Advancing the Black and Brown Perspective. It's about ground-rooted in community policing. Right, we need to bring healthy community policing back into our community, making sure our police officers have a psychological evaluation every 2 years, because their jobs are stressful, right? At any given time, they see a lot of things. They see death, they see everything. So I need to make sure they're fit to be on my streets. And then the second one is making sure that we have anti-bias training and making sure that's culturally fit for our community. And I would love to see my police officers that live in my community so they get to know everybody that's in the community. So if John is having a problem, he already knows what John is because he actually lives here. Instead of something that he read from a book, this John character is looking out of whack. And sometimes our children is not out of whack, that's just how they play. That's just how they talk. But if you don't have that type of training, you don't know how to address my children. So we need to make sure they live in our community as well.
Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Ms. Tamika Mapp. Are we going to take some audience questions, or are we good?
All right. Try to slow down.
I think are we doing the index cards, or are we? Yeah, okay.
Yay, I like questions.
I'm asking these on behalf of folks who filled out some cards, so I just want to go ahead and start with this one. For the first question is from one of our members, Louis Kleiman. He wants to know, we are in a flood-prone area right now where we're holding this, and there's actually projections for sea level rise to increase dramatically, actually, as we kind of go through the climate crisis. So how do you propose to handle the problems of sea level rise?
Ooh, I got to do a little bit more research on that to give you a definite answer. So for not really researching, just making sure that we collaborate with our East Harlem KOD and making sure we stay in close contact with REACT to be able to give the resources that we need and to educate the community. But whoever answered that question, if you email me, I would definitely get you an answer back.
Great, thank you. Our next is from Jewel. Her question is kind of related. Please tell me your thoughts about the East Harlem Esplanade. East River Esplanade, sorry.
Well, I would like to see a ferry in my community. So I'm trying to make sure that we keep our funding there, fix it up, and making sure that we have fair access in our community. It's a long overdue process, right? People keep on putting money into problems and then let it kind of like draw out in the wayside. So as a part of elected officials' job is keeping track of all the little projects that's been done before them and making sure that it moves forward. So I will be keeping track of it, making sure it moves forward. If it needs funding, provide funding. But I'm also going to be leading on the community to make sure that we're doing the right things for it, because my job depends on your advocacy. If you don't provide no advocacy to the elected official, regardless of who's in here, you're not going to get no results. And that's what I've been finding. That's what's wrong with the 68th Assembly District. They want to wait for somebody to save them instead of them saving themselves.
Thank you. Next question, also from Lewis Kleiman. What can the Assembly do to alleviate the parking problems that will arise out of congestion pricing?
Parking permits. I've been asking for parking permits since 2006, right? When our state say, oh, we're out of funding and we can't have funding. If we institute parking permits, right, at a reasonable rate of $10 a year, like they do in Boston, then we'll be able to park our cars that we have here in the city and combat people who coming from out of state, you know, from Connecticut, New Jersey, coming here and then taking a train downtown. That's the only way we can do it, is making sure that we institute parking permits in the communities.
Thank you. Those are the questions that I have.
Thank you.
Pamela, I don't know if there were additional.
All right, perfect. So my closing statement.
So you have one.
Okay.
Tamika, I just want to thank you for showing up today, showing up for your community, and showing up for We Act. Thank you so much. We appreciate all you do.
No, thank you guys. I mean, I love you guys. I love every part of the community, no matter what, right? We always never, I'm going to do my opening statement here so it could be 1 and 2 holds. We may never ever see our views and our ideas aligning together, but we don't know if we always come with our blinders on. Or if you already, like, your friend told you this about somebody, so now your face is turned up instead of you actually knowing who the person is. Pretty much, I am just who I am. I am a fighter. I am a person that I don't try to avoid conflict. I like conflict, because that's the only way that you're going to get resolved. If you create conflict, then there's room for improvement, there's room for learning, there's room for growth. If you kind of shy away from conflict and you shriveled and be like a shrink invalid, this job is not for you. You cannot be a shrink invalid as the state assembly member. You have to be loud. You have to be the loudest one in the room. You have to be able to stand up, and you have to be consistent. It's not picking and choosing when you want to do something for the community. It's being a leader at all times, and then when you want to become an elected official, you're already doing the work instead of trying to make up ground and trying to figure out who you're trying to be in this whole race. Just be the leader that you are, and the elected position will come natural to you. You don't have to force nobody to be your choice, because you are the choice. So I thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Xavier Santiago, please.
So we are here sitting with the chair of Community Board 11, Mr. Xavier Santiago, who has been a community leader for more time than I can remember. He's also a candidate for the Assembly District number 68 here in East Harlem. So we're here to ask him some questions. So welcome.
Morning.
The first thing I want to ask, just briefly, tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you to run for this seat.
Well, first, thank you for hosting it. Thank you to We Act and everyone who's participating, and everyone, the viewers, part of our Manhattan neighborhood networks who are here in beautiful Barrio and the Firehouse. My name, Xavier Santiago. I've raising what will be the 5th generation here in this community with roots, going way deep between here and the South Bronx. My abuelita, she just turned 99 yesterday. And my dad, who was raised in Millbrook houses, this is the only neighborhood that's really felt like home for me. And I live here in this community. I run my own business. I'm a producer by trade. Prior to that, I actually worked in the tech sector. If those that remember Y2K, the world's gonna end. When the clock goes midnight. lost my job in the tech sector, and I went back to school. I went to conservatory. And, so originally my BA was at Bowdoin College up north. I was like one of 5 Boricua in Maine, but then I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, started hitting the ground running, and of course being in the acting side, you have to be very empathetic. I was asked to produce a film, liked it, went to Columbia, haven't looked back, and so started our company, St. Productions here. During that time, I met a friend of mine, George Santana, and I said, look, I want to get more involved. How can I make a difference in this community that I love? And he said, join your community board. So I applied back when Scott Stringer was our borough president and have been serving for over 15 years, including when I was spending a short period of time for my wife's career abroad, and haven't looked back. And been in senior leadership for 6 years, obviously as the chair. I've chaired multiple committees that we have authored legislation, or not legislation, resolutions that have led to legislation and positions within the city council and the state. So for us, it's about making it better. My father always said, leave it better than you found it. And that's, that is I would say the inspiration for running, but it was also having all the different community stakeholders, the leaders, people that are our revered elders who said, listen, we need someone who's just going to walk the talk, because a lot of people, but they don't actually do the work. Okay. And for me, you got to have someone who's going to be able to afford the cut and pay, be able to get in the trenches, just like a good producer. All they do is they just toe the line, and I think that's very important in leadership. Yeah.
So I have a couple questions for you. Some are yes or no. The first one is going to be yes or no, and then we'll lead on to others. Okay. Do you support ending the use of fossil fuels in New York State?
Long term, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. So we have the average surface temperatures in East Harlem are really high, particularly in the summer months. It's roughly 2 degrees higher than the rest of the city. And then we also have an air quality issue on the east side compared to the west side. What resilience programs or policies do you plan to support to reduce these different environmental metrics for vulnerable New Yorkers?
So talking about metrics, East Harlem has one of the highest rates of asthma. My best friend who grew up in Johnson houses, and this is partly by the design of Robert Moses when he displaced communities, and part of our campaign position is righting the wrongs of Robert Moses. That's a massive lift, but you've got to start somewhere. We have, the Million Tree campaign was a good start, but the average temperature, you see the way the vehicular traffic going in and out of the city, that creates pollutants, and also to that nexus of the tri-borough causes a massive problem. So in addition to the Million Tree campaign, I answered in the questionnaire, I think it's really, we've been seeing in urban landscapes, if you look at in Japan, they're doing the wild forest where there's small carve-outs, and we can use that in some of our smaller gardens. In addition to the Million Tree campaigns, you have the Billion Oyster campaign, which is cleaning up our river here. And if you remember, I think we've now had 3 sightings of dolphins, aquatic life that we haven't witnessed in probably our entire lifetimes, being a Gen Xer. It's a beautiful thing that we have to steer toward that, but we also have to look at ways that we can decrease the amount of smog and pollutants. Vehicular traffic is one of the highest. You have our buildings that even the ones we exist in here, they're also one of the highest pollutants as well. They're antiquated systems, and we have to work towards meaningful, tenable solutions to actually change that. So for me, it's advocating you got to have a short, a mid, and a long-term gain. And some of those solutions, like the Million Tree campaign, Billion Oyster campaign, local gardens that are actually what they call like small wild forests that are actually in keeping with the natural flora and fauna within this environment. That's how we can actually start to shift that the pollutants out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So a little bit around that. We have, it seems to be that community voices here in East Harlem are some of, I don't know if I would say silenced, but definitely not the ones that are heard the loudest. How would you increase community voice in the decision-making power over land use? This is critical for Harlem. We are overburdened with polluting facilities and with folks that are just coming here to, grab the land and conceive of their own opportunities instead of the community. How are we going to combat that?
So what we've done at the community board, and if you've followed our history, we've actually paved the way for those solutions. Working with our previous council member, Melissa Mark Viverito, and the Sendero Verde project, when they came with that development, they came with 4 economic bands, and we came to approximately, I think it was 11, through negotiation back and forth. And if you look at the LEED certification on that building, it's one of the largest buildings that are affordable, energy conservation is one of their benchmarks there. So that's one of the ways we can actually address that from an environmental concerns. Now, when it comes to displacement, which is what you're talking about with gentrification, we have to put rungs back in the ladder socioeconomically. We had programs, so like where my dad, he was lucky enough to go to Wesleyan on scholarship. I went on scholarship and worked 3 jobs for a living, doing construction, bartending, and retail. I still had to work my tail off. So we advocated, so again, putting the rungs back in the ladder. There are scholarship programs, there are programs here in the community so we can get our kids educated so they can reinvest. In the meantime, you need people who have been successful to be able to come back into this community. We've had tons of displacement, but when we have programs such as the co-ops like at the Palm and others that allow people that are working class to stay in this community and have mixed income, they can then build equity. And what happens is that next generation, their kids are all together. They're building relationships, exposed to different career paths, things that can change the trajectory of their life. So suddenly we now have, instead of it just being NYCHA or just Section 8, you have multiple bands of affordability. And those children play together, they grow together, their parents are interacting and building their own relationships to actually foster change. Now when it comes to those that are, say, like the vulture funds that are trying to buy a property here, there are steps we could take to stop that, but it's going to take 149 other members, and you have to be very convincing. And what I say as a producer, they often say is a silver tongue, but my colleagues say I have a bit more of a platinum one. I'm like, I can't afford platinum, but it's about convincing of the argument and getting people to come together, right? Coalesce. And in order to do that, you have to, as my first mentor said to me, Xavier, you're not here on this planet for people to get you. You're here to get people. The sooner you start doing that, the sooner you bring people together. And that's the point of doing this, is to bring people together. And that's why I have a large coalition of support. And I hope to bring all of us together and to have environmental justice here. So I hope, very long story. But thank you.
We appreciate that comprehensive response. Speaking of community voices, this week, the New York State Ed Department released a report on mayoral control in terms of school governance. We learned in that report that parents, teachers, and students do not feel included as decision-making partners in our schools. Yes or no? Do you believe in mayoral control?
No.
You said no, just in case y'all didn't hear.
No, and I'm going to be abundantly clear. Our community, and having listened to the parents and the principals and the teachers, they're frustrated. They feel neglected, and I actually here in this community had 3 teachers talk to me saying they're having to buy supplies. Why? That's a problem.
So with that being said, what legislation would you support to bring resources to our young people in our community? You already spoke a little bit about that, but we're currently experiencing budget cuts in early childhood, in full funding of our schools, and even libraries in our neighborhoods. How would you respond to that?
So as an assembly member, you have 2 budgetary processes, as I'm sure a lot of people know, but from the community board, we've advocated numerous times on investing in our schools, our libraries, including the after-school programs, teacher programs, and part of that process isn't obviously funded at the city level, but some of that comes from the state as well. So again, doubling down on that, but when it comes to mayoral control, you have to really examine how that influence with the chancellor. I don't speak ill about anyone, but the fact is the results are in the pudding. We're not seeing the investment in our communities of color, and that is disheartening. So you can approach, again, making sure that the teachers, the CECs, are being listened to, and that give them a little bit more teeth. Also, too, making sure there's a collaborative effort when it comes to the funding process. Again, going back to winning friends, influencing people, working with our council members and other people who deal with the budgetary process, it's crucial. And if you look at our libraries here that have been shuttered, we've again, from my leadership, doubled down on we need to invest in those libraries. The only one we have functioning right now is right on 96th Street.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yes. Yeah. As an assembly member, how would you achieve equity in healthcare? And would you support the New York Health Act and a single-payer system?
I am supportive of a single-payer system, but I'm going to rewind and be a little bit wonky for everyone. My dad's a retired physician, not bad for a kid from the Bronx, raised by a single mom. He actually was on the side, dating myself, when we had insurance, it used to be 80-20. You paid your premium, broken ankle, 80-20, paid your 20%. Heart surgery, 80-20. 87 bond crisis, a lot of those founders, those CEOs of those bond companies went into managed care. And my dad and a bunch of other physicians up and down the Eastern Seaboard pursued and fought against them at advancing HMOs and PPOs because it would actually impact what we pay today. Mm-hmm. It would impact Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rates, which are 70 cents on the dollar. So yes, you can have a single payer system that could be helpful to those, but you have to regulate what the insurance companies are doing, because you shouldn't have to wait if you have a torn MCL in your knee several weeks to get that scan done. You know, the doctor should not have to go through the bureaucracy. Right. Oh, you have to do an X-ray. Then we got to wait 3 weeks to schedule an MRI. Right. That's part of the problem. And I think in legislation, the New Year Health Act, they have to put in the regulation to say you have to expedite things so you can get through crisis intervention care to managed care and then to preventative care. And that's part of the problem we have. We're not actually healing the body. We're subduing symptoms and not curing the cause.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So my last question is, we've seen an alarming uptick of surveillance of policing in predominantly Black and Latino communities. We've even had the National Guard in our subways. How would you use your platform to protect Northern Manhattan community members from excessive policing?
Okay. Well, as someone who's been stopped and frisked, and understanding what that feels like, and also witnessing the positive results we have with the 23rd, 25th precincts here in PSA 5, we have a healthier relationship when it comes to community policing than most. It's about, again, they used to have where you had community police officers living in the community, and in order to protect them, they changed their policy to move them out of the community. That obviously takes away from that societal investment with one another, them really getting to know, to feel the community, the pulse. We also too, so one of the things as an assembly member I would push to make sure that they can live in close proximity to the community they serve, even if they're in the next borough, trying to hire and get people assigned to maybe a borough they grew up in. For example, the 2-3 and 2-5 in PSA 5 have multiple members who actually grew up here. They're still connected, but also working with the relationships we have with those city agencies to make sure that those officers that are here, they don't get managed out to another location because that location needs attention. Trying to maintain those relationships fosters trust, and that builds community. And that's something that we've done in my service as a leader here for 15 years to build community trust. And you can shatter it in one moment, but as an assembly member, I would lead by example in making sure that we're maintaining those bonds. So.
Thank you. Yeah. I know the audience has some questions for you, so.
Sure.
Hi, Mrs. Santiago. Thank you for being with us today.
It's not on.
So we just have a few questions from the audience here today. So our first one is from Emma Jackson. Her question is, going forward with the proposed changes coming to NYCHA and the public housing, what are your thoughts about advocacy and services to these residents?
I have a complete soft spot for NYCHA. I wouldn't be here without it. Like I said, my dad grew up in Millbrook houses. The privatization, full stop. I've not been supportive of that. We need to have funding that has to come from the federal level. I have a good relationship with our Congressman, Espaillat, and we have to get that funding through, and funding from the state as well. So but when it comes to services, we have been able to pipeline when it comes to recertification, when it comes to public safety issues. I've had to deal, in fact, I was just on a call with the TA president from Taft and from Johnson when there were, for example, needle refuse just dumped there, and being able to help be that change. So I think we have to continue funding. It is the first rung of affordability, and for a lot of families to move up the economic ladder. So.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Joyce Bialik. Okay. Her question is more of a statement. So on our walks, we found much more dirty blocks in East Harlem than on the Upper East Side, and almost no four-corner litter baskets. What could you do in the state legislature to fix this problem?
Funding. It's all money, and also too maintaining good working relationships with DSNY. If you look at our budget request, every single year we ask for litter cleanup. We've seen disparities on 116th, 125th, but yeah, and again, we have to change the culture. Just like we eventually evolved the culture in Community Board 11, and when I got on, Whereas one of a couple parliamentarians, you would get people calling for points of order and they're yelling on chairs. Now we have a much more civil discourse. So it's again changing the culture here in the community to value it and say, listen, we're going to clean it up. In fact, I was actually speaking with some youth and talked to them because they're at-risk youth, and they're like, how can I deal with these issues? And I said, look, the battle starts in the gray. That's where it's won. So make up your bed every single day. You control that. And these are kids who are foster kids. I have a lot of instability, but I said, you can control that, right? As someone who was once on assistance with my family, and believe me, and again, I'm getting to a larger point here about how we change this community for the better, is that when my father could have given up on everything, when it was just taken, and we went on assistance, he kept pushing forward. So reminding these children, make your bed for 28 days, then clean up your room, then clean up your block. That's how you make change. So from a state level, funding, working with our council member to advocate, which again, having good relationships and going to those people who are the power brokers who can actually initiate change. That's what I would advance. But I think we also have to take ownership. Just like when the street cleaners were not coming on 102 where I live, we got our push brooms. Then I called the superintendent at DSNY with the broom sweeps, and he started paying attention, ticketing people, because the culture used to be everyone would double park, street cleaner would come, everyone would move back. Post-pandemic, it changed. So that's how we change, is working together as a community. So, yeah.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Louis Kleinman. He asks, what can the Assembly do to alleviate parking problems that may arise from congestion pricing?
Oh, I love this. So I've studied this extensively when we were taken abroad for my wife's career. Most partners I know wouldn't do something like that to break through the glass ceiling. For me, it was important to walk that walk. They have resident parking permits there, just like they do in other cities. What they apply, though, is that based on the borough you live in, and then based on the neighborhood you live in. So community parking permits, and this has been argued at the city level and at the state level, it can get applied through one of two measures, either getting assigned through DOT, it could get assigned to DMV, to have resident parking permits. And it's carved up perfectly here in Manhattan with our community districts and these nice even chunks. So getting a resident parking permit would be important, but in order to do that, you have to have your plates and your insurance here. And what is that going to have is a huge knock-on impact for not just making the community better and safer and cleaner, is that what we will see is that by doing that, you're going to actually see people's insurance rates lower. Everyone likes to save money, right? Do we like to save money? Yeah, we like to save money. 96th Street East Side, 106 West Side, there's a higher insurance rate for your cars. That's point of fact. You go just south of 96th Street, you can be on 95th, your insurance rate drop. A resident parking permit would enforce those that are domiciled or live here to get their plates, their insurance here. We're going to see the insurance rates come down. That's going to have an overall impact. So resident parking permits would be crucial, and because it's going to offset congestion pricing as well, because we're going to see an impact here. We already saw it during the pandemic. People started driving in, and they're still driving in, timing with alternate side parking, taking spots from locals. So this would actually change that narrative. And I did have a discussion with Jamie Torres Springer about this and saying you should really give an exemption to the borough of Manhattan, and he just was hands down no. And we have people here who have mobility issues that need use of their vehicles to get to their doctor's appointments. So this is, again, it's a collective effort, but yeah, so those resident parking permits.
Thank you. Our next question also comes from Louis Kleinman. So he notes that we live in a floodplain pretty much here in Manhattan, and he wanted to know what you propose to do to handle the problems associated with sea level rise.
Right. So this is something I've cared about since I did my undergrad, and Bowdoin up north are eco-friendly and environmentally driven. If we had been on the opposite side of the tide, this community would have been beyond decimated with the hurricane. And it was catastrophic. So how do we offset, like what we're doing over Metropolitan Hospital with the flood barriers? We would need to have more investments, also some flood walls coming into the river, so when that pushes back, it can retard the process of it coming in and hitting against the East River Esplanade and other areas and then working its way out. But we also have to build the infrastructure that can pump out the water. As we have the creek coming through that we were built up on marshland. that is, again, the saturation point. Our infrastructure in the city, which we would take the combination of the city and state working together to invest in this community to offset that. And again, when you build up the sea life, like the oyster campaign, that's actually, and you can actually build reefs further out, that would actually create preservation and buffers to sea level rise. So it's going to take a long-term impact, a long-term effort to actually make those changes. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Jewel. She asks, actually this is kind of on topic, please tell me your thoughts about the East River Esplanade.
It's got to get done. We got the funding from our, and a combination of efforts from our previous assembly member, Robert Rodriguez and others. We have to invest on that. It's long overdue. And again, back to righting the wrongs of Robert Moses, that infrastructure, and they just released their design schematic. Been a big advocate for getting a ferry service that can work with the tides, because obviously in that area of the East River, they have to dredge that continuously. But it can be done. And if we had more finance, people, more wealth here, high net worth wealth, you could actually see that investment. So we have to advocate as a community to make that happen. But the Esplanade needs to be fully redeveloped. The funding's there. We want to see a ferry service. We've been advocating for that for God knows how long. And to actually see that activated. And I'd like to see an additional footbridge as well, so that we have multiple points of access so people can get on the Esplanade.
All right, and our last question comes from Katie Cannon. She asks, as a member of an HDFC, I'm aware of the ending of the tax exemption DAMP. What is your stance, and how can we prolong the program?
Legislation. It's that simple. It's legislation. We actually took up to the board. We have a resolution coming out that's going to be dealing with 421A, and these are issues we can advocate for to to push back the sunset. So I think when it comes to DAMP and other, in HDFCs, everyone, for those that don't know, they're one of our most affordable co-op opportunities here, and we have to maintain them. That's the second rung in the ladder, and it's a preservation of our working class. So we would have to present legislation, depending on what committee you're on, to actually reinstall that.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I have from the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Xavier.
Hi.
Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share with our membership in the community?
Yeah, it's an honor to be with everyone here, every single individual. You are part of the cure. As I say, it's not about subduing symptoms, it's about curing the cause. And right here, we have to all work together and work in lockstep to actually make change. In the Assembly, the 150 people that are members of that body, I have to work with 100, if elected, 149 other people to win over, to convince. And part of doing that is actually traveling to their districts to get them and getting them to come visit us. Again, I've served this community for 15 years. Very pleased to have my business base here, hire local, and be an advocate for change. But as my dad said, you got to lead by example. Whereas I'm a bit of a geek, so kind of leave you with this. I have Alaskan Malamutes, which are sled animals, and the way we say, I'm very much like my dogs. But a leader is the first to start and the last to stop. And that's what I'll do for this community. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We love having you here.
Good afternoon, East Harlem. We are here with one of our candidates for the Assembly District 68, Mr. Will Smith, who also happens to be one of our district leaders here in East Harlem and well known in the neighborhood, particularly, as we're walking around our favorite eateries, right? So, Will, the first thing I want to ask you is to tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you to run for this seat.
Oh, well, I appreciate that question. So I've been in public service since I was 25. First started off as a volunteer in the King Tower Senior Center on 112th and Lenox Avenue. So that was my first introduction to understanding human services and understanding the plight of our senior community. So that really energized my passion to expand my involvement. I've always been interested in politics. I attended a political rally back when I was 8 years old. for former Congressman Charles Rangel when he had his reelection in 1994. So that was an enlightening experience for me. And then I got the opportunity to meet him. And at that time, I was very interested in understanding the work of the federal government and President Clinton's crime bill, and understanding how the government impacts trade. So it's been an ongoing journey, but in terms of being on the ground, I've first started out working in the State Assembly as a policy analyst and community liaison. It's a great experience. I focused on NYCHA issues and focused on social service issues as well. And that's something that has always been very passionate for me, something that I think we need to focus more on in our community. What are the resources that we can bring to our community members, and how can we work together in terms of getting everyone on the same page? So it's been quite an experience in these past, 12 years now, and I look forward to expanding my involvement. So I'm running for Assembly because I want to advocate for East Harlem in a different way. I want to have a focus on bringing resources, bring a voice to the budgetary process so that we can get the resources that we need. East Harlem is a great, vibrant community. We're going through a lot of development. We have 2nd Avenue, a subway, phase 2 coming in. So we want to make sure that we have the right representative that not only advocates for the resources, but also can serve as a steward with all of these issues that we're going through right now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I'm going to have a couple of yes or no questions, but embedded in there are some where you'll elaborate a little bit more for our communities. And then once we're done, there's going to be some audience questions as well.
Look forward to
I'm not the only one who's going to be talking here. The first question, super simple, yes or no. Do you support ending the use of fossil fuels in New York State?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, good. Now some issues that are a little bit more local. So during the summer, the average temperature in East Harlem are typically about 2 degrees higher than the city overall. In addition, we also have very poor air quality, particularly compared to the west side. So we're wondering, what resilience programs or policies are you going to support to reduce some of these environmental factors for our East Harlem community?
Well, I think one thing is I think the next Assembly member should advocate for a working group and a study to be done in terms of analyzing and evaluating the amount of emissions and the amount of car traffic that we have. Because a lot of people fail to realize that in order to get to the George Washington Bridge through the FDR, you have to come through East Harlem. In order to get to the south, to the Bronx, through the South Bronx, and end up in to get to the rest of the Northeast corridor of our coast, you need to get through through East Harlem to get to the Bronx. So we need to have a better understanding of how many cars are coming through our community on either a hourly, weekly, quarterly basis, and have a better understanding how we can improve traffic patterns and reduce congestion. So that way, that can be one way to address the rising temperatures. In addition, we need to focus on state investments in the automotive industry, either through the pension funds or encouraging for the manufacture of carbon neutral automobiles in New York State, so that way more of our community members can support us getting to a carbon future, and still be able to achieve their transportation needs.
Thank you for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about, how do we bring in community to different conversations. So how will you increase community voices and decision-making power over land use? So critical issue for East Harlem residents. We are an area in Manhattan that's completely overburdened by polluting facilities and folks that want to create their own personal opportunities by land grabs. So how would we invest in our community under your leadership for community voices to be heard and be part of?
Well, I always stress the importance for our community members to have a better understanding of how government works. In regards to land use, that's more of a municipal, local process. So as an Assembly member, I would push for legislation for us to have civic education so people can understand how land is transferred and what's the process to either go about buying and transferring of land in our municipality. Also work on pushing for legislation that created better tax grants for average community members who aspire to be property owners and property managers, to have a pathway to be able to achieve that goal. We really need to put the resources in the hands of our people, but most importantly, like I said, we need to empower them with the information.
Thank you. So speaking of community voices, this week, the New York State Ed Department released a report on mayoral control in terms of school governance. We learned in that report that parents, teachers, and students do not feel included in the decision-making process of our schools. This is a yes or no question. Do you believe in mayoral control as a school governance structure for New York City?
I'm going to say no, and I would like to expand on it.
Sure. Well,
I would say no, because there's a need to reform that current process, because we want to ensure that our parents have more input in terms of the direction of our schools, and ensure also that the students have input. I think that's really important, because I remember I went to public high school. I went to A. Philip Randolph Campus High School, and I remember taking a particular midterm and being a little frustrated, because I felt as if I was really just there to take an exam as opposed to grasping and mastering the content in that particular subject. So we need a focus on that. And we want to, like I said, ensure that our community members have more input in the curriculum. And yes, it's important that the mayor have, operational insight and input, but it all starts with all of us. We need to be the ones in the forefront making the decision making and have more equity at the table.
Thank you. As somebody that's part of that world, I appreciate that. Anyway, what legislation would you support to bring more resources to the young people in our community, especially now at a time where we're seeing budget cuts to early childhood programs, full funding of public schools, and our libraries are actively being defunded?
I think that's an egregious situation. Literacy should be and is the top priority for all of us. I know reading is a continuous experience. In order to navigate our evolving technology world that we're in now, you have to have a certain level of comprehension and literacy. So I want to make sure that we push for more funding to address those issues and provide the resources that for those that either maybe just need a little bit of extra of a push, or those that maybe need a little bit more extra help and support. So we need to push for that. In terms of how we support our youth, I did the Upward Bound program when I was in high school after my sophomore year in high school. Yeah. It was a great program. They had instruction from 4 to 6. We had basketball, and then we went on a college tour, and there was a focus on us writing a term paper. So it was a really good warm-up in terms of thinking about your pathway to college. So we need more programs like Upward Bound, and we need to invest in those. And it needs to be programs that are 7 days a week. Our youth need outlets and opportunities in order to grow. But when we think about right now, are we really doing an adequate job? And I said adequate. We want to be stellar with our delivery, but are we doing an adequate job with delivering services and support for them? I don't think we are. One time I was on Lexington Avenue, and I spoke to some youth about their desire to go to college. They have a strong desire to go to college, but for one, I know that there's a gap in understanding the funding sources that are available to them. A lot of them know that there's FAFSA, the federal Pell Grant funding, as well as TAP funding in New York State. And for those I went to City College, I went through the SEEK program. Right. So we need to promote those type of programs and provide more information to those youth. And then finally, we need a state plan on how to address the student loan crisis. We need to better incentivize ways for our youth to go to college and make sure that they're not burdened with a significant debt once they graduate and they're trying to grow their lives and build families.
Right. Thank you. Switching a little bit, kind of in your area of expertise as an assembly member, how would you achieve equity in healthcare? And yes or no, would you support the New York Health Act and a single payer system?
Absolutely. We never want our households and families to have to debate between paying their rent and covering their health care. And what our government has failed to realize is that while the current system benefits the pharmaceutical companies, it benefits the healthcare companies, we need to focus on benefiting our patients and benefiting our communities. We need to expand funding for Medicaid. We need to ensure that when a patient has a Medicaid card that they're not turned away because Medicaid doesn't pay an equitable reimbursement rate. We need to improve those reimbursement rates and also ensure that the administrative burden to apply for that particular healthcare service, Medicaid, is improved. It needs to significantly be streamlined. Everyone deserves to have a healthy existence. And as we saw when President Obama pushed for the health care plan, it was a great step in the right direction. But on a state level, we need a health care program that addresses the rising costs of health care and ensures that people get expanded and improved service. We need a better service delivery. That has to be our top focus.
Thank you. So this is my last question before the audience gets to ask you some questions. But One of the concerns is that we've seen an alarming uptick in the surveillance of Black and Latino communities. We've even had the National Guard in our subway systems. How will you use your platform to protect Northern Manhattan residents from excessive policing?
I appreciate that question. For someone who's been stopped multiple times during the Bloomberg administration, and I've had various instances where the police did not divulge promptly the reason why I was being stopped. I think there's a need for us to better educate our police officers on how to communicate with our communities, and for them to understand in different jurisdictions there's a different form of communication. The way you communicate with those in East Harlem is different than the way you would communicate with those in Coney Island or those in City Island or in Kingsbridge. So we need to have better cultural sensitivity with our officers. Additionally, we need to push for, like I mentioned before, civic education, but from a focus of knowing your rights. What happens when a police officer stops you? What are your rights? And I think this is something that we need to address in the schools. We need to add it as part of the curriculum, and also ensure that those that are in the community in general are able to have outlets and venues to be able to acquire the information on know what to do when you're stopped by the police, understand what are your rights, and if your rights are violated potentially, what are the proper routes? Going to the Civilian Complaint Review Board and ensuring, and also as an assembly member, I want to push for there to be a state level Civilian Complaint Review Board and stricter enforcement, so that way this locality ensures that our rights are upheld and that the police understand that they have to conduct themselves with a certain level of tact.
Thank you. Audience questions, you ready?
Okay. So these are questions from some of our members in the audience. I'm going to start with a question from Emma Jackson. It says, going forward with the proposed changes coming to NYCHA and public housing, what are your thoughts about advocacy and services to the residents?
I appreciate that question. NYCHA has been, as we all know, and this is I'm preaching to the choir, has been significantly heavily underfunded, right, by the state legislature and the federal government. And that's something that what we're seeing right now, in my personal opinion, we're seeing that the federal government has failed all of our NYCHA residents, has failed New York City public housing. Public housing is the backbone for upholding the public contract, social contract, if you will, and we need to ensure that NYCHA has a long-term future. Its current pathway, I'm not encouraged by it. I worry about the fact that private developers would be managing these properties, and have we written in the laws the right protections for NYCHA residents to make sure that they not only can stay in their homes, but that we can eliminate the anxiety that's hovering over all of them right now. For those properties that would require transitioning their subsidies from Section 9 to Section 8 and the voting procedures, we need to sponsor a bill to raise the percentage of heads of households that are able to vote. The current percentage of 20% is completely inadequate. I wrote 2 comment letters in regards to the voting procedures. The original procedures mandated 10%. Now, we all know that's not an adequate number. And then a lot of us wrote in our comment letters, I wanted 50%, if not higher, right? But obviously, there's a need for more advocacy. I have spoken to legislators informally around pushing for that. They have been receptive to the idea. My final point is that we need to empower our NYCHA residents with a better understanding from a civic education perspective on what is going on, why are they transitioning, and what are these financial mechanisms that are being used to transition NYCHA. And finally, our NYCHA residents deserve to have the same opportunities as anyone else, regardless of their income level. But in my opinion, the fact that you originate from public housing should be looked upon as a badge of honor, because you've gone through federally subsidized housing, and we need to make sure that our NYCHA residents have opportunities to not only prosper where they live now, but also be able to transition and move on in their professional lives and financial lives in a way that makes it prosperous for all of them. We need to focus on making everybody feel secure.
Resident Management Corporation, .120.
I knew Russell wasn't able to help himself, but thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that. Resident input is absolutely paramount in this process. All voices need to be heard, and we all need to have a seat at the table.
Absolutely. Next question comes from Jewel. Please tell me your thoughts about the East River Esplanade.
Oh, I appreciate that question. I think it is very important from an economic perspective that that the Esplanade be expanded and that project be expedited. We need to encourage those in the community to go and support, but we have a lot of tourists that come to our community, right? And if that Esplanade is well put together, we'll be able to see more tourists coming to our community, more tourists spending money in our stores, which will result in what? Higher sales tax revenue, higher tax revenue from the businesses, which we would hope that we would be able to make sure we got our fair share of that revenue. So there's a need for that. But aside from that, we want to make sure our youth are able to experience what it's like to be in the waterfront. For our seniors to be able to have peace of mind and sit there and enjoy the breeze and see the boats going by. I know when it's been challenging times for me, that's the first place I go to the East River and to just sit and enjoy the peace. And it's a great experience. But we need, as an assembly member, I would intend to advocate for expanded funding for that, as well as making sure we get a ferry to East Harlem. That's something that's paramount. And it all needs to be done in conjunction with one another.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. The next question is from Lewis Kleiman. What can the Assembly do to alleviate the parking problems that may arise from congestion pricing?
All right, so let's just clarify this. State Assembly member would only have an impact in terms of adjustments to the traffic law. That would be something that the local municipality or the city council would have to make adjustments. But as the assembly member for East Harlem, I would absolutely want to be in the forefront of those discussions and sit at the table to make sure that East Harlem doesn't deal with the brunt of all of the additional congestion, because we know with congestion pricing, a lot of the cars are going to end up here. They're going to end up parking up here and jumping on the train to head downtown. So that I would probably encourage us to come up with a way to think about local residents having access to a certain amount of parking spaces possibly, and maybe thinking about that as a revenue generating mechanism, but very low, very low fees, because we don't want to have barriers for those that are low income that still depend on their automobile to get from point A to point B. Sorry.
Thank you. And I think this is the last question, also from Lewis Kleiman. We're currently in a flood zone where we're at right now in this part of the city. How do you propose to handle the problems of sea level rise?
Appreciate that question. I think there is a need for the assembly member and the state legislature to push for a stronger dialogue with the Army Corps of Engineers, because that's the agency in FEMA, because those are the federal agencies that are responsible for resiliency, right, in terms of our shoreline. Metropolitan Hospital is still working on their construction of their flood wall. I think it would be important for us to think about how we would build flood walls for other areas and properties. I know East River is very vulnerable. Wilson Houses is vulnerable. Franklin, even though they're right across the street, they're vulnerable. So just thinking about all of the areas that are in flood zones and ensuring that the state not only informs those property owners of their rights and also informing them of the programs available to them to improve the resiliency. But overall, it's the state's responsibility, in my opinion, state homeland security, to make sure that our entire shoreline in East Harlem is well prepared for any floods, and that we have the contingency plans in place to address any potential mass flooding. Because when we're dealing with floods, we have to think about lives and our safety.
Thank you.
So, Will, I just wanted to thank you for attending the Candidates Forum today. We are so happy to receive you here.
It's a pleasure.
And do you have any closing remarks?
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank all of you for attending. I appreciate all of your questions. Thank you so much for your questions and your contribution. I salute WEAC for your work, and I thank you for being a part of this process of availing to the community, all of the candidates, so they can all make informed decisions. As a next assembly member, I want to push for us to bring resources to East Harlem. We need an assembly member that will advocate for East Harlem every day, be its biggest cheerleader and promoter, and advocate for the resources and the equity that we deserve. East Harlem, the 68th Assembly District, is a beautiful, vibrant, culturally rich district. We need to build on that. And as we see, we have billions of dollars coming in with the 2nd Avenue Phase 2 subway. We want to ensure that more of our community members are able to get access to the jobs. We want to ensure that the environmental impact of that project is well understood and well disseminated to our community. And as the Assembly member, I promise that I will advocate for all of you to get all of the information that's possible so that all of you can be, everyone needs to be on the same page. Finally, our Assembly member needs to focus on coalition building. Everybody needs to be at the table and has to be a part of the decision-making process. I intend to work with all of you. It's 110,000 plus of us. But if we all get together and we all work together, block by block, development, community by community, we can all get on the same page. Coalition building for East Harlem must be our top priority, as well as ensuring that we have affordable housing, that our NYCHA residents are secure, and as well as ensuring that we are positioned for a vibrant economic future in our Assembly District. So I thank all of you, and God bless East Harlem and the 68th Assembly District. Thank you.
And it's a wrap.
Any other informal questions?
Well, I just want to go over just a few dates so that people don't forget. I think it should be the last slide where we go over election dates, because I really need folks to come out and vote. Encourage your neighbors and encourage your friends, family. Yes, right here.
Yeah.
So, important dates. June 15th is the last day to register to vote in the primary election. Please, folks, if you need to register, please register before then, okay? And then June 15th to June 23rd, early voting for primary elections. We don't want to have we don't want people to miss the opportunity for their voices to be heard. Please participate in early voting. Also, keep in mind, if we don't utilize this tool that we have right now, we could lose it. So it is imperative that we take advantage of early voting. Also, October 26th is the last day you can register for the general election. I'm not trying to hear that. I need everyone to register before the primary election. But if you happen to run into some folks who are not registered after that, please ensure that they get registered by October 26th. And again, early voting for the general election is October 26th through November 3rd. And November 5th, the all-important general election. Please come out and vote for that as well. Thank you.
And the importance of early voting, it's important that more of us vote early, because in my conversations with the Board of Elections, if more of us voted early, we'd be able to get more early voting sites, which would also result in more poll worker jobs for our community members.
Right. Exactly.
So if you vote, if you vote early or you vote in general, know that it expands opportunities for your residents and community members to be a part of the electoral process, getting paid. We all like to get paid, right?
Yeah, reach out to some of those district leaders, because they can also get you some of those jobs working as poll workers.
Yes.
Yes.
Say that again.
Reach out to your district leaders, because they're supposed to be able to help you get some of those jobs working as poll workers during the election cycle. But all parties. Well, yeah, pretty much all parties.
All right.
I guess that's a wrap, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Well, thank you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.